Photoshop color settings can be a little tricky to get a hold of at first, but let's take some of the mystery out of them. I've got 4 images open, and I'm going to choose Window, Arrange, 4 up. In fact, I can press Shift-Tab to hide the panels on the right, and on each window I could choose Command-0 or Control-0 or zoom in and zoom out to see a bit more. I chose these images with intent. If you want to compare color on several different shots to control better how your color is output, you typically want something with blue sky because we have memory colors. Everyone knows what blue sky looks like. Green grass or trees, skin tones to make sure that people aren't green. When we're looking at our color, we know what different skin tones should look like. And a black and white photo. So to see where the color settings are in Photoshop, I'm going to select the snorkel image first. And I will choose Edit Color Settings. Now, if your goal is just to print to a color inkjet printer you have at home, or just share images online, the default settings of North America General Purpose 2 are just fine. In fact, if you're curious about any one of these settings, you can move your mouse over them and you get a description down here at the bottom. So it says the sRGB, which is supposed to stand for Super RGB, predicts the average color of your monitor. It's endorsed by many hardware and software manufacturers, and it's the default for most consumer class point-and-shoot cameras. But if you're going to a printing press, at some point you'll need to convert to CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And it gives you specifications for going to a coated stock of paper on a web press, one that uses rolls, if you were to convert it. Now, when we print colors, shades of gray often tend to look darker in the darkest areas. What looks like 80% on screen might turn into 100% visually, making your blacks very dark. That's what dot gain is known as. If you drop your coffee on a magazine, it might roll right off, but if you drop it on a newspaper, it might absorb and ripple. So if you look at thinner, less expensive stocks of paper, more ink is absorbed and the color is duller, and therefore it might gain more because of the spreading of the ink in the darkest areas. So that's just a brief explanation of what dot gain is. Now, to control your color in images, there are profiles that are embedded. A profile is technically an ICC profile, which stands for the International Color Consortium. It's a little extra file stored in the image that travels with the image that attempts to control how it looks and how it prints. And there are monitor profiles, camera profiles, scanner profiles, and you can embed profiles in your images so you're gaining more control as they travel. Now, if you're creating images for high-end print, where you're going to send this to a print shop to be color separated and put on a printing press, Adobe and I recommend the North America Prepress 2. And when I choose North America Prepress 2, I'll see it switches to the preferred print color space of Adobe RGB 1998. And talk to your printer, they love it when you ask these questions, but you can determine whether you're going on coated stocks of paper, which can hold more ink, or uncoated, and on a web press, which is a roll, or sheet fed, which feeds in pre-cut sheets, and again coated, which can hold more colors, or uncoated, which can't hold as much on the paper. I'm going to leave these at the defaults, and I'll click OK, and I want to show you how to experiment with your color settings to see what they're doing to the image. In fact, Facebook, over the last 2 years, has supported color profiles in JPEG images. So if you're creating images to upload to social media, test different profiles to see which is producing the closest color to what you saw on your screen. I prefer, even for Facebook and a lot of my online media, the Adobe RGB 1998. sRGB was this web standard for years, but since many browsers, and Facebook specifically, are reading the profiles, Adobe RGB often produces a closer image and richer color, in my opinion, than the sRGB, the more generic standard. So if I go to Edit, Assign Profile, this image had the default sRGB or Super RGB. If I want to see what it would look like in my preferred print color space of Adobe RGB, I can select Adobe RGB and look at the radical difference in the brightness of her pink shirt and even a bit of the water in the background. So you could test each. I could try out some other ones. Pro Photo is usually used by high-end photographers, and it tends to look a little artificial on screen, but can on film recording devices produce some very rich results. This one I haven't seen read by Facebook, but you could test by making several copies with different profiles of your image and uploading them. So I will click Cancel and just leave it on the default sRGB. I'll select this image and scroll down so I can see a little bit more of the green, Edit, Assign Profile, and this one is Adobe RGB. But if I switch to the sRGB, here is your difference. It's very subtle, but I see richer blue skies in the Adobe RGB. I'll do the same on this one. Edit, Assign Profile, sRGB, a little bit flatter in my opinion. Adobe RGB, richer, more vibrant. And then finally, we need to know what shades of gray will look like when they're printed. So a black and white image is usually a good one to pull for your color testing. Edit, Assign Profile. It's on Adobe RGB. I'll go to sRGB. Really no noticeable difference. A slight bit in the clouds between Adobe RGB and sRGB. I could see it right here if you watch carefully, but it's so subtle. I'm going to go with my preferred Adobe RGB. So if you're going to prepare high-end images, the bottom line is under Edit Color Settings, choose the North America Prepress. If you get images from other people that were created with sRGB as the default and you prefer the Adobe RGB color space, you could choose Edit, Assign Profile, and attach the Adobe RGB 1998.